So first off, let's think about our expression of the day. Now, I've introduced this expression before, not in the online environment, probably a year or so ago. So I don't know if anyone remembers it, but the expression is to take after someone. And to take after someone, this expression means like to resemble someone. Now, of course, most of us would use this to talk about our parents. So like we resemble our parents either in physical appearance or in characteristics, behavior, personality, or both. So again, let's use the chat box one more time for this first question. So who do you take after? Are you more like your mom, more like your dad? Are there different things that you share? For example, I think I probably take more after my dad in our appearance. Of course, when I was younger, I think I looked more like my mom. But in terms of personality, I would say I'm probably both. So how would you guys describe yourself? So for me, my appearance would be more like my dad, and then probably both for my personality and so on. Okay, so Mariana says maybe more after her dad. Okay. Okay, so Kelly says both and more mom's side. Okay, that's good. Okay, Saba says her dad. Interesting. Risa says dad. Dad's character. Okay. Your parents after your mom. Okay. So a little bit of, yeah. I think that's probably typical, right? Yeah. All right. Nokar says more like mom. Okay. Yeah. In fact, I think I'm kind of almost perfect 50-50 of my parents with my personality. You know, very much like that. All right. Frank and Freeine, what about you guys? Your parents take our morning classes, so I think you guys kind of take after both a little bit in appearance. What do you think? So Freeine says 50-50. Okay, we won't ask you which 50. All right. So anyway, this particular expression, notice we can use it specifically with our parents. You know, who do we resemble? Who do we take after? But in this next screen, you'll see I'm going to be using it in talking about generations. So that's going to be kind of connecting to our discussion for just a moment about millennials. So actually, I think everybody in this group will really find this interesting. So there is an organization. This organization is called the Pew Research Center, and they've been around a long time. And once in a while, I like to do just some, see what kind of generation research, because I have students, from different generations. So they recently published some data on talking about millennials. So again, that's a lot of you here in the group, on how millennials and how they are not taking after previous generations. So, for example, when we think about having children or starting a family life, so one piece of information they talk about in the article that when we think about comparing people of similar ages, now again, the millennial generation is just not quite 40 years old. So we're pretty much right at the 40-year-old mark for the oldest millennials. But if you notice, as a group, only about 44% of millennials are married, compared to 51% of Gen Xers and 61% of boomers at comparable ages. So when we think about, for example, on Monday, we talked a little bit about how millennials are getting married later and later. At this point, still only about 44% of millennials are married. So again, as you can see, that's a big change from the previous generations. That's not even 50%. So I thought we would open up the microphones for this next little discussion and share some of the research with you. So why do you think, what do you think are some reasons why millennials and previous generations are so different with regards to marriage, having children, family life, and so on? So who would like to start? Why do you think millennials are so different from these previous generations when it comes to getting married and having and starting a family? What do you think could be some reasons? Who has a thought?
So,
What do you think, Frank? You got an idea?
yes, I think that millennials we are taking everything like soft. So we are letting so we are not taking like some responsibilities. In fact, yes, we do.
Okay.
So we have less we have less important belief like families, um what else, like having kids.
So
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 also,
so
yeah,
Frank, one thing you're saying is you're focused on different things.
yes, and even some kind of extreme um groups, we can say, I forgot the word, but oh, movements
Okay.
like feminisms or
Like cultural social movements.
yes,
Okay.
they are taking place in the thinking of most the millennials persons. So I think that it has like a huge weight on their
Okay.
feelings, thinkings.
Okay.
So
I think it's something about with money. I think in this generation, people are most focused on their career
Okay.
and jobs and get a good work. So focus on study to be able to have a good job and make money. And they are also it's different. Like usually the generations before the millennials, they have more kids, and millennials they are having one or two kids. Is kind of different too. Um, so yes, I think it's about money and
So,
work.
so for example, do you think it's because the economic situation is
Yeah.
worse, or do you think it's because millennials are more focused on careers first? I mean, maybe
Yes.
some
I
combination,
don't.
or what do you think?
It could be a combination of these both
Okay.
reasons, but I think it's mostly um about the career.
Okay, so focus more on career. Maybe, in fact, in one of my other classes this week, we were discussing, how old people are when they're getting married. So, for example, here in the United States, the average age for people getting married the first time are men are 30 and women are 28. So, I think what we're seeing is, yeah, people pushing marriage off till later and later. So
Mhm.
yeah, maybe it's career, maybe it's the economy. Okay, so those could be some good reasons. All right. And of course, guys, here in the group, we've got different millennials. Think about it. Some of you are closer to the younger end, and some of you might be in the middle of the millennial generation. So even then, I think we've got different age groups here inside of this millennial generation. Any other thoughts as to why maybe millennials are delaying some of these things? Kelly, what do you think?
I think because of the how to explain that, like to get a good career going on or good work, then you need to have a university diploma or something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
the increased sort of requirements, yeah, because like for example, the boomer generation, maybe you only needed a high school diploma,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
now, yeah, now to get a good job requires more school, more education.
mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah,
could be a big reason. I think that's probably true too. I think going through school, I think especially of my generation, the Generation X group, I think that we began starting to think about those things, but probably not as much. For example, when I, started college, the economy was, not great, but when I
mm-hmm.
graduated college, the economy was great. It was probably one of the best economies in the history of the United States. So in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, I didn't have to go, like, I didn't need a master's degree. I didn't need to go back to school for more education. So I
Yes,
think you're right. I think today you want a good job, you almost need a master's degree.
yes,
Yeah, so
exactly.
I think that's a good point, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, maybe you guys can agree too, I think life is just getting more expensive, isn't it?
Oh
In your countries, are you seeing that too?
yeah.
Yeah. What kind of things do we see that are getting more expensive?
For example, my situation, I'm from one of the islands in Estonia.
Hmm.
So basically my island right now is getting more popular in Estonia. So
Okay.
basically everybody's trying to get a house and property there, which means the locals' life are going more expensive, like way more expensive.
Right.
Like that's why like locals right now actually like struggles a lot with this lot of works because otherwise they're not going to survive there. Basically my mom and dad both have like 4, 5, 6 different jobs right now going on to just survive in Ireland.
Yeah, and Kelly, I think that's happened all over the world. I think
Yeah.
places that have become, like, for example, if you think about here in the United States, cities like San Francisco, Washington D.C., these particular cities, everybody wants to live there, and
Yeah.
I think in a way that just makes the cost of housing, the cost of everything, very
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Mm.
Anybody else? Your countries? Do you think life is just getting more expensive? What do you think? Anybody else have a thought?
Yeah, in Germany, kind of the big capital cities or big cities in general, they get super expensive, and kind of the prices for like an apartment or rent in general got like 50% higher than they were before. So it's
So,
really expensive living in general.
so Sonia, are younger people like sharing apartments? Like living with more roommates, or are they staying more at home?
It's more popular to build like kind of an apartment that you share with friends if you're like a student.
Okay.
Then usually people like rent an apartment and live there together. But usually I think people like live by themselves and move out maybe in the early 20s, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. What happened here with in the United States? So I know some of you come from cultures where maybe it's kind of common to live at home, like in college, for example, or university, and then maybe even after college or university. But here in the United States, like with my generation, it was not so common to stay at home. So, for example, after you would graduate high school, usually you would maybe go to college, or maybe you would try to move out on your own. And especially after college, my generation especially, you didn't think about coming back home. You wanted to be independent. But I think the millennial generation, especially the millennial generation, they had some unfortunate economic situations. In 2008, we had a big recession, and that was the time when most millennials, that first group, remember, millennials were the first generation of millennials, the first group of millennials were born in 1980. Well, think about it, 18 years, 19 years later, you're getting into the early 2000s. Well, the economy started to go down. And unfortunately, more and more millennials started staying at home, or they would graduate college. So again, 22 years later, now you're getting closer to that big recession. So as you can see, I think that had become a big social thing too. So Sonia, I think here in America, a lot of young people moved back home. In fact, I think they said now that there's still about 18% of millennials still living with their families. Now, of course, some millennials are in their 20s, but that's a pretty big percentage. So anyway, I wanted to show you here on the screen. As you can see, this is the article. It was published in May, so you can see up there May 27th. And just notice what it says. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. And then what I'm going to do after class is I'll send you this link just in case you're interested, just in case you'd like to take a look at it. But the idea is instead of thinking about, 40% for Gen Xers at the same age had children and a spouse, right now only about 30% are living with a spouse and a child. So again, not just married, but even just having a child. So it's a pretty small percentage, only 30% at this point. So again, if you look here and you notice some of the research, I don't want to get into motion sickness here, but I wanted to show you this little chart here on the screen. So let me highlight it here. So again, notice over here are the different generations, okay? And basically, when thinking about the age groups, 23 to 38, thinking about those particular ranges for their ages, where are they at these particular times? So for example, between 23 and 38, notice millennials and Generation Xers were kind of similar in some ways, being married but no children. But then notice over here on the right side, comparing the percentages between those who have a husband or wife and a child, notice there's a big difference in percentage. So again, that's a big difference. That's a 10% difference, and of course, that's not as big as between my generation and the baby boomer generation. Now, of course, everybody, if we can take a look at the silent generation, and again, the silent generation is kind of closer to my parents. Notice that by the time they were in their 20s and 30s, 70% of them were already married and had kids. So that's a pretty big dramatic change. If you think over here on the left side and about the year 1968 compared to 2019, that is a huge difference. So I think some of you guys made some good observations. Yeah, probably the economy. I think the economy is probably the biggest. So Mariana, I think you were right in thinking about those economic situations of what happened here. But anyway, I just wanted to point out this again. If you're ever looking for something kind of interesting to read, often this kind of information is pretty interesting. It's a great way to think about, and also to think about our different groups, our different countries are represented. I think you'll see that a lot of the generational research is pretty much the same in a lot of countries. Think about it. A lot of you said things that are pretty much true of millennials here in the United States. One more thing I just wanted to point out. It says here 14% live with their parents. Okay, so not 18, 14%, sorry. But I want to highlight this one little paragraph right here just to show everybody. So it says millennials with a bachelor's degree or more education are more likely than those with less education to live with a spouse and no child. And then if you think about college-educated millennials, this is what's interesting, are least likely to live with a child and no spouse. So what that means, kind of surprising, is that here in the United States, basically, we used to believe that if you had more education, so again, thinking about some of what you guys said, that you were probably not likely to be married and have children. But the truth is, even for the millennial generation, the people who are most likely to be married are the people with the most education. And the people who are most likely to have children, at least with one child, are often those with most education. Though, honestly, those families are pretty small. I think most of you said maybe one or two children. So I think in some ways that is true in the United States. The people who have more kids aren't necessarily the most educated, but the people who are most likely to be married probably have a higher education. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think I think we see now, like Kelly mentioned and a few others, that life is expensive. And if we're going to get better life, we want people with more education, and we see them as more sort of attractive for getting married. So anyway, some pretty interesting stuff here. So again, when we're finished here, I'll be happy to send you the link if you want to read a little bit more about it. I always find it kind of interesting to learn more about kind of these social trends. So, okay, well guys, thanks for joining in that discussion there. So again, I think those are some interesting observations you guys made. Okay, so once again, our expression for the day is to take after. So once again, we can take after our parents, like in terms of how we resemble them, maybe personality, maybe physical appearance. But notice in my question, we can also think about how do generations take after the previous generations? And I think what we're seeing here, the answer is probably not in most ways. Some ways, yes. But if I think about my generation, even compared to my parents' generation, we really don't take after them very much. When it comes to thinking about stability. And now with the millennial generation and Generation Z, probably going to be even bigger changes. So yeah, who knows what the future is going to be. All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and talk about our grammar topic for this evening. And we've got a few activities we're going to do along the way. So each week I've tried to choose a topic that I think I have noticed that students often have difficulty with. So again, 2 weeks ago, we talked about some verbs and verb issues. Last week, and this current activity is prepositions. So again, prepositions I find students often have trouble with. But I would say that probably a topic that almost every English speaker has difficulty with is adverbs. So not just ESL students, but also English speakers, just native speakers, have trouble with adverbs. So first off, let's just kind of review for just a moment. So when we talk about parts of speech, so again, parts of speech are basically, the words we use in language. We think about, the different nouns, adjectives, and so on. We generally have many, many different parts of speech. So for example, when we talk about verbs, that's a part of speech. When we talk about prepositions, that's a part of speech. Now, generally, we have what are called 4 major parts of speech. So these are kind of like the 4 big ones when it comes to having meaning in a sentence. So you guys can just say them there at your phone or computer. So let's say these words together: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Now, nouns, verbs, adjectives, again, they all have tricky things about them, but adverbs can be very tricky. And one reason is because they are the most flexible of all of these parts of speech. We can use adverbs in a few different ways. So that's what we're going to be doing here tonight and with our next activity, is looking at some of the different ways that we can, that adverbs can be tricky to students. Now, we will not talk about every possible adverb because that's just too big a category. But the idea is we're going to focus on some of the more important uses of adverbs. So first off, let's talk about the number 1 use, and that is that adverbs modify or describe verbs. Okay? So the most common use of adverbs is in describing verbs. And basically, we fit these particular adverbs into 5 categories. So again, you can say this with me there at your phone or computer. So guys, repeat after me. To describe when the verb takes place. Okay, and that's referring to time, expressions of time. Okay, here's the next one. Repeat after me. To describe where the verb takes place. Okay, so those are expressions of location. Okay, here's the next one. To describe how the verb takes place. Okay, and those are adverbs of manner. Okay, here's the next one. To describe why the verb takes place. Okay, and those are adverbs of reason or purpose. And finally, to describe how often the verb takes place. And those are adverbs of frequency. So once again, there are those 5 categories: time, location, manner, reason, and frequency. Okay? Now, one of the first challenges students have is often when they look at a sentence, they don't necessarily know what every word is doing in the sentence. And I think, in my opinion, adverbs can be the trickiest. So guys, we're going to do a little activity right now, and this activity is going to involve some people reading some sentences for us. So what I'm going to do in just a moment is ask different students to read a sentence, but then I would like for everybody to give their answer of what they think is being described. So I'll explain here in just a moment. But first, over on the right side, here are those 5 categories: time, location, manner, reason, purpose, and frequency. Okay, now over on the left side, first I'm going to get some people to help us. So let's see, Risa, would you read number 1 for us there on the left side?
Okay. He has rivers on the island or his wife.
Okay, all right, Saba, what about number 2?
She shops in several stores to get the best buys.
Okay, thank you. Sonia, what about number 3?
They try to get back before dark.
Okay, all right, Friyeen, what about number 4?
Oh, sorry.
Try it again, Friyeen.
She often goes by herself.
By herself.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, and finally, number 5. Let's see, Mariana, how about number 5?
I move it slowly and spoke quietly.
Okay. All right, guys. Now, over on the right side, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read each of the 5 situations. I want you guys to tell me which number sentence I'm talking about. So, for example, let's talk about letter A there. Which one is describing a time expression? Who can tell us?
Number 3, before dark.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right. What about letter B? Which one is describing location?
Number 1.
Number 1.
All right. Very good. So on the island. All right. What about letter C? Which one is giving us the manner? Remember, that means how we do something.
5.
Yeah, very good. Number 5. So for example, how did she move? Slowly, right? And how did I move? Sorry, guys. How did I move? Slowly. And how did I speak? Quietly. So that answers the question, how. All right, which one is talking about the reason or purpose?
Number 2.
So
Very good, very good. I think that was Nelcar there, right? So in this case, it tells us why. So for example, the sentence says she shops in several stores. So the question is why? Why does she shop in several stores? Well, to get the best buys. Well, of course, at this point, we're not really doing much shopping in the store. Maybe shopping on Amazon, right? And what about the last one, letter E? Oh, this is easy. Which one is it?
4.
Yeah, number 4, frequency, for example, the word often. By the way, what are some other frequency words? Often is one example. Who can tell us some more? What are some other frequency words?
Usually, sometimes,
Sometimes, usually, okay.
usually,
Always.
Always, rarely.
rarely,
What's the opposite of always?
Never.
Never, there you go. Sometimes, right? Every day, right? Yeah, so the idea here is adverbs. Now, look very carefully, guys. When you look here on the screen, can you start to begin to see why adverbs can be tricky? For example, go back to number 5 and number 4. In this case, do you notice that the adverbs are only one word? Okay, but look at 1 and 2 and 3. What do you notice about those adverbs? Just one word?
There's a helpers.
Yeah, the problem is they're not just one word, they're phrases. So one of the tricky things about adverbs, most students when they think about adverbs, and I'm sure you guys think about adverbs all the time, right? You probably dream about adverbs. But most students when they think about adverbs, they think about the letters ly. And usually, if you think about it, that's many of the one-word adverbs we use in English have ly, right? And again, when I think of adverbs like in Spanish, I think of mente, M-E-N-T-E. So my Spanish speakers, we use that particular suffix, and that means that it's an adverb. So most students think about the ly ending. But the truth is, even these expressions can tell us adverbial ideas. And of course, if you notice in number 2, I'm going to clear the screen for just a moment. Look at number 2. Notice this adverb kind of looks familiar. Who can remind us, what does this mean, to get? Where have we seen this before? To and a verb. Anybody remember this one? What do we call this? Anybody? It was just a couple weeks ago we talked about them.
Yes, it's an infinitive.
Congratulations, it is. Yeah, so if you remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about gerunds and infinitives. And we said that infinitives often can be like nouns in a sentence, right? So for example, if I said to play a sport is my favorite activity, right? To play baseball. But in this case, the infinitive is serving a different purpose. It's telling us why they do something. For example, why do I teach English? Well, I teach English to help students. So in this case, to help students is like an adverb in the sentence. It's explaining why we do things. So again, what I want you to think about is adverbs are not just these ly words. Adverbs tell us important things, and often they use expressions. So for example, on the island, that's an adverb. Even though on is a preposition, so that was last week, right? Prepositions. Adverbs themselves can be 2 words, 3 words. And that's one of the things that often gets kind of tricky for students, okay? So that's kind of our first sort of introduction. So thinking about adverbs and verbs, let's go ahead to our next screen, okay? Now, one way that students can be tricked by adverbs is where we put adverbs in a sentence. And guess what? This is tricky for English speakers too. Now, in general, adverbs can go 3 places. So again, you can say these, you just practice them right there at your phone or computer. So repeat after me. Happily, she went to work. She happily went to work. She went to work happily. Okay. All right. Now, can you see why this might be a problem? You see, the problem is, in general, adverbs can go different places. Notice I said in general, but the problem is not all of them can go everywhere. And that's what brings up a problem. Again, many of these, all 3 of these examples here basically have the same meaning, but that's not always the case. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But one place where we cannot put an adverb is between a verb and its object. Now, this is where English is perhaps different from some of the languages here in our group. So for example, let's look at the next screen. Okay, so again, I think about Spanish because that's my second language. And again, I have some Spanish speakers and some Portuguese speakers in the group, but maybe this is also true for your language. So I want to show you 2 sentences, okay? Now, I want you to tell me, is one of them right, one of them wrong, or are both of them right? Okay, so take a look at the screen right now. I'm going to put these 2 sentences here on the screen. So what do you think? Do you think one is right, one is wrong, or do you think both are right? So let's use the chat box for this one. Do you think the first one is right or wrong, the second one right or wrong, or both? Okay, let's use the chat box. What do you think? Okay, what do you think? You think they're both right? Okay, Kelly says both.
No, I go for the first one, but the second sounds like the same.
Okay, so you think they kind of sound similar, okay? All right. All right, so it looks like most of the group here is starting to come in and say the first one. Okay, so now again, I'm using this as an example because I know that some of the languages here in this class might think that the second one is correct, or at least the second one is common in your language. So for example, in Spanish, it would be perfectly correct to say, she speaks well English. However, we cannot do that in English. So what I want to first kind of talk about is the subject, she, right? The verb is speaks, and then English would be the object of the sentence. Well, like I just mentioned a moment ago, we cannot separate the verb from its object with an adverb. You cannot do that. So in this case, only the first sentence would be grammatically correct. The second sentence would not be. So in this case, so Frank, again, I'm thinking of Spanish here because that's my second language. In this case, yeah, the second sentence sounds fine in Spanish, but unfortunately, we would not use that in English. So keep that in mind, okay? So in this case, we don't separate the verb and its object, okay? So think of those things as kind of connected. So now, again, that could be a problem for students. If your language uses them differently, that might be one way that can be tricky. So once again, in English, verb and their object word order is very strict. So in this case, you never separate them with an adverb. Only the first sentence would be correct, okay? All right, let's look at another way. So another tricky issue is thinking about how sometimes we put the adverbs in different places and suddenly we change the meaning of the sentence. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, in fact, I would really recommend for everybody, if you have any friends, English-speaking friends, you can try this little exercise, and I think you'd be surprised to see how many native English speakers would struggle with this activity. But oftentimes, English speakers frequently put words in the wrong locations, and it's because, as we mentioned earlier, in general, we can put adverbs in different places, but certain words we can't. So, for example, these 4 words here we see on the screen. So everybody, you can say them there with me. Barely, only, just, and nearly. These particular words, and there are a few more that fit into this category, English speakers often put them in the wrong places, or they put them in places that they didn't mean to. Okay. All right. Now, this next activity, again, I'm going to ask you guys to help me with a little bit. So what I'm going to show you on the next screen is I'm going to show you basically three groups of sentences. So let's take a look at them. Okay. So take a moment, guys. Look at each of these. Look at each of these examples. Okay. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance just to look at them pretty quickly. Now, here comes our first problem. You see, most English speakers, they don't see a difference in meaning between these two sentences. So they think that both A and B are the same. And again, one reason why English speakers make this mistake is because adverb placement, as you saw a few moments ago, adverb placement is generally fairly flexible. I can put it at the beginning of a sentence and between the subject and verb, and sometimes, and even at the end of the sentence in general. But like we said, that can pose a problem. So for example, let's focus on choice A for these three sentences, okay? Now, again, what I'm going to do here in just a moment is get some people to help us, but I want you to think about what would be the true intention if we chose A in each one, okay? So, for example, I'm going to ask Mariana to help me with this first one. So, Mariana, could you read number 1 there on the screen? So, I've highlighted A. So, this is the meaning if you choose letter A. So, could you read that one for us?
Yes. He barely kicked the ball 20 yards.
Okay. So can you read the number 1 there, the intention for us?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
He used a little effort, and the ball still went 20 yards.
So let's think about the meaning of letter A. So what it means is this guy is a Superman. This guy is like a super kicker, and he did almost nothing. Like he just moved his leg just a little bit and the ball went 20 yards, right? So this guy's like the Incredible Hulk, right? Or Iron Man or some superhero. Now, the question is, are most people superheroes? I don't know. Mariana, are you a superhero?
No.
No, probably not.
No.
Last time you checked? No? Okay. So see, the problem here is if I put barely before the word kick, now I'm modifying basically how I kick the ball 20 yards. Well, again, 20 yards, guys, that's a pretty long distance. I think most of us in this class, maybe we could kick a soccer ball, maybe 20 yards. But again, 20 yards is still kind of far. So if I put the word barely before the word kick, now the sentence is kind of strange. He barely did something, like he didn't even use any energy. Okay, so that's what letter A would mean for number 1. Okay, Saba, let's try number 2. Oh, sorry. Saba, could you read number 2 for us?
Okay. The only thing the child did in her life is grow 4 feet.
Now, I don't know about you, Saba, but I think children do more than just grow, don't they? Don't children eat and talk and run and play and?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, right? Children just don't sit there and grow and that's all they do. Well, so here's the problem. If you put only before the word grow, now you're saying that this is the only thing the child did in his or her life. The child only grew. That's it. That's all the child did. They only grew. They didn't speak. They didn't eat. That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, children do. Yeah, children, you guys do more than that, right? Okay. So again, there's a problem. If I put only before the word grow, now it's describing the word grow. And guys, again, children do more than that. All right, Nelkar, would you like to try number 3? Can you?
Yes,
Okay.
the driver did something that resembled driving 80
miles per hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, if I choose letter A, it says the driver nearly drove. He didn't really drive, he almost drove. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but can you almost drive? I mean, when you're sitting in the car and you're turning the wheel, can you almost do that?
No.
No, you either drive or you don't, right? So in this case, this sentence is clearly crazy. Yeah, and in fact, the driver did something that looked like driving, but it wasn't driving. Now, guys, that's insane. That's crazy. But see, here's the problem. Most English speakers don't understand the mistake they're making. Now, is it possible? Are some of these like really possible? I guess. I mean, again, number one, if you're a superhero, maybe. Number two, if the only thing you did as a child is grow, and then number three, that's even crazier. If you only almost drove something. Again, that makes no sense. Okay, now let's go back for just a moment, and now let's choose letter B. You see, most likely, guys, B is probably the true intention of the speaker. So now let's see how the meaning changes when we put the adverb before the correct part of the sentence that they are modifying. So now, Kelly, how about you read number 1 for us now?
He kicked the ball, maybe with all of his strength, got only 20 yards.
So again, when we say he kicked the ball. So he kicked the ball maybe as hard as he could, but more than likely he barely got 20 yards. So in other words, he kicked it and 20 yards was the result. So if you notice, now the word barely is modifying how many yards he kicked. Now guys, what about you? Do you think you could kick 20 yards? You probably don't even know what's a yard, right? So a yard is a little bit like a meter. You know, it's a little longer, but it's about a meter. So do you think you guys could kick it about 20 meters?
Yes.
Yeah? Do you think you would kick it farther than that?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I was pretty good with the
Okay.
ball.
I think I would probably be like this guy, barely 20 yards. Okay. Yeah, as you notice, Americans, we're not great at soccer. So in this case, now the sentence makes more sense. It's not talking about how he kicked the ball. It's talking about how far he kicked the ball. Okay, let's try number 2. Risa, would you read number 2 for us?
The child grew to just 4 feet and not any taller.
Now, doesn't that seem more realistic, Risa? I mean, a child can do many things and they can grow too, right? Doesn't that seem more like a realistic thing?
Realistic.
Yeah, I mean, children do lots of things. They don't just only grow. So in this case, children they talk, they run. So now we can see that only is supposed to describe how tall they are, not their action. So a child grew only to this size. Now, in this case, that child's probably not going to get any taller, right? I mean, you grow to 4 feet. Now, maybe they might get taller, who knows? But in this case, now we can see that the person was describing their height, not the action. Okay? Sonia, how about number 3 there? What about the last one?
The driver nearly drove 80 miles per hour.
Uh-oh, try again. You read A, not B.
Oh, sorry.
So you made a mistake.
The driver drove nearly 80 miles per hour.
There you go. And so what does that mean? So he drove.
Really drove 80 miles per hour, a little bit less maybe.
Yeah, so it was close to 80 miles per hour, but maybe not exactly. But the key here is that the driver drove, right? We know that. He didn't almost drive, he did drive. So in this case, he drove nearly 80 miles an hour. So the word nearly now is describing the speed, not the action. Okay? Now, guys, the reason I wanted to show you this is most English speakers would not be able to understand the difference. And I think the truth is, if I say either A or B in a conversation, most people would interpret the sentence like letter B. When they hear the sentence, they would realize, oh yeah, for example, number 1, of course, you're talking about the distance, not how hard he kicked the ball. And number 2, of course, you're talking about how tall the person is, not the fact that that was the only thing they did in their life was to grow. So again, that's part of the problem here, is that English speakers don't often realize that they're being ungrammatical, but they often are trying to just understand the intention of what you say. So guys, the reason I'm showing you this here tonight is those little words like barely and only and nearly. Many times you need to put them directly before the word they describe. Okay, so that's one little trick when it comes to using adverbs. Okay, guys, our final topic, real quickly, is thinking about adverbs and adjectives. Now, adverbs modify adjectives, but sometimes they can even be mistaken for each other. But let's start with this first group here. So, one of the main ways that adverbs describe adjectives is modifying their intensity. So let's look at these examples here. So for example, in the following sentence, okay, so let's see, Frank, would you like to read this first sentence for us?
The actor is talented.
Okay, now if I add an adverb of intensity, okay, so now Saba, read the next one.
Okay. The actor is very talented.
So now notice, instead of just saying talented, we've added an adverb to describe the word talented. So now not just talented, but very talented, okay? Now, of course, we can also reduce the intensity. You know, very makes it a lot. What about the opposite? So for example, Kelly, how about the last one there on the screen?
I'm not sure if I'm seeing that. The actor is not so talented.
That's correct. So in this case, now we see that the actor is not really talented, right? So we have very talented, talented, and then not so talented, okay? So in this case, adverbs can add a certain intensity. They can make things more. So again, words like very, words like really, these are words that can make these adjectives more or less intense, right? So how can they be tricky? Well, for example, sometimes English speakers confuse adverbs and adjectives. Now, guys, look at this next sentence. Can somebody spot the mistake? What is the mistake in this sentence? Anybody? Can anybody guess?
Isn't it supposed to be really instead of real?
Congratulations, you win the free ice cream. So in this case, yes, but English speakers might say this. He can run real fast. Like, so thinking about real, often people mistake it for the word really. So in this case, Sonia, you're correct. Believe it or not, English speakers often make this mistake. He's real good, right? Have you heard that before? It's real good. It's real fast. So oftentimes, maybe in conversation, like just with your friends, they might use this instead of the word really. But the truth is, really should be the answer, okay? So again, these are some common tricks that students often have when it comes to adverbs and adjectives, okay? Look at the next one. What's the mistake in this sentence?
Badly.
Exactly. Again, good, bad, right? We think of those words like, again, thinking of describing things. But the truth is, yeah, the answer should be badly. He spoke badly of you. Now, does that seem a little strange to you, though? Does it seem unusual to say he spoke badly of you? Do you hear people say the word badly?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. But it's not, I think a lot of English speakers just use the word bad for everything, right? Yeah, so in this case, I think it's just, again, it's an issue of what we kind of commonly hear every day. But the truth is, we should say he spoke badly of you. But again, many people might say, well, he spoke bad of you. Okay. All right. Now here are a couple of examples that students often get confused. So for example, look at this sentence. Now, is this sentence incorrect?
Maybe it's correct.
Okay, what does it mean, Saba?
She's doing good. She's, I think she's excellent. She's, maybe.
Well, excellent what? You mean like excellent feeling or what?
Yeah, maybe feeling.
Okay. All right. Well, for example, guys, every time you guys come to class and I say, how are you today? What do most people say?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah, 99.9% of you say I'm good, right? Nobody ever comes in and says, I'm so distraught, I'm so depressed. No, everybody usually says I'm good. Okay, well, here's the problem. The problem is that's not the meaning of this sentence. If you said she is doing good, so actually, Saba, you are correct that the sentence is grammatically acceptable. but it doesn't mean what you think it means. You see, if you say, for example, she's doing good, what that means is that she's doing good things for other people. So in this case, we might say, like, again, superheroes, right? Superheroes do good, like they try to help people in society. So guys, you should say this. If you're feeling fine, like if you're feeling in a positive way, you should say, we're feeling well, like we're doing well. So when I ask you guys, how are you today? And everybody says good, I'm usually pretty relaxed, right? Okay, but now we know we should say, how are you today? Everyone, we should say what?
Feeling well.
I'm doing good.
No, Saba, you're not a superhero. No, you're doing well.
Doing well.
Yeah, or you're well, or you're feeling well.
Yeah.
Okay, now, of course, guys, let's be honest. What do most Americans say? What do most English speakers say? Do they say that, I'm feeling well? Do they say that?
No,
No, they say I'm
No,
good.
no,
I'm good.
Yeah, they say I'm good.
I'm good.
So,
Yes.
what I'm telling you is, in everyday conversation, that's fine. That's fine. But the truth is, the correct grammar should be, we're doing well. So that's what I wanted to mention here. Now, look at this last example. She's doing her job good. Well, again, a lot of English speakers think this sentence is perfectly fine because they're trying to use the word good like you would use the word well. So in this case, this sentence is incorrect. We should say she is doing her job well, because well is an adverb. See, good is not an adverb, but because well and good often get confused, people use them in the wrong way. So keep in mind, even people using the word good, even English speakers, we don't always use it correctly. Now, guys, our time is just about up here, but I wanted to go ahead and mention one more quick topic. So another tricky area for students using adjectives are ones that look like adverbs, but they're not adverbs. So, for example, all of these words end in the letters ly. So again, most students think ly words are adverbs. But the truth is there are a few exceptions. So everyone say these words with me here. Lovely, lonely, motherly, friendly, neighborly. Now, all of these words end in ly, but they are not adverbs. They are adjectives. They describe people and places and things. Look at the three examples at the bottom of the screen. He is a friendly person. Friendly is describing person. That is a very neighborly act. Neighborly is describing act. And finally, lonely. Lonely is describing you, how you are. In this case, so I'm lonely, I'm feeling lonely. So feeling in this case is describing how you are, not as an action. So again, even the word lonely is an adjective, not an adverb. Okay, now here is our final activity. So we're going to do this one pretty quickly. Okay, all right, so I'm going to ask different people real quickly. I want you to read the sentence, and then I want you to tell me, do you think this word is an adjective or an adverb? So Risa, would you read number 1 for us?
You speak too quickly.
So what do you think? Is quickly an adjective in this case or an adverb?
Adjective.
Oh, good guess, but no.
Adverb.
It's an adverb. And the reason you can answer that question, Risa, is answer this. How does she speak? Or how do you speak?
Mm.
Yeah, the answer is quickly. So if it answers how, that's an adverb, right? It's an adverb of manner. Okay, let's see. Saba, would you try number 2 for us?
He has a very quick mind.
Okay, so the word quick. Adjective or
Yeah,
adverb?
adverb.
Oh, good guess, but no.
No? Why?
Yeah. So for example, the word quick is describing the word mind.
Mind. Oh.
Yeah. Now, guys, this is one that actually, if you look at it, is a little bit easier than you think. Do you notice number 1 quickly has an ly? Well, remember, most ly words are adverbs. So in this case, quick does not have an ly. So in this case, it's an adjective. Okay? Freeine, you want to read number 3 for us?
No one is unfriendly as she is.
So what do you think, Freen? Friendly, adjective or adverb?
As the girl is open in the friendship.
So what do you think? Are we using it as an adjective
Oh,
or an adverb?
sorry.
What do you think?
Is adverbs?
Oh, good guess. But no. So guys, I just talked about it a minute ago, right? So remember the word friendly looks like an adverb, but it's an adjective. It's describing her. It's describing the person. Okay? All right, Sonia, how about number 4? Sonia. Let's see. Sonia may not hear me right now.
Oh, sorry, I
Okay.
forgot to unmute.
Okay.
I'm not understanding you well right now. It's an adverb.
Congratulations. Yeah, so remember, well, the word well is always an adverb. So in this case, that's an easy answer here. So well is describing how the person is understanding them, which is, in this case, not very well. Okay, let's see. Nelkar, would you like to try number 5?
That police officer is doing good in the community.
So what do you think? Good in this case,
Is
adverb or adjective?
Adjective.
Congratulations. Yeah, so again, the word good, everybody, the word good is always an adjective, okay? Now, the word well can be an adjective too, but in this case, good is always an adjective, so there is no doubt there. All right, now let's look at the last 2 real quickly. And guys, everybody can answer this one. So if you notice in number 6 and number 7, I have the word pretty. One of these is an adjective and one of these is an adverb. So which one do you think is the adjective? Do you think it's number 6 or do you think it's number 7?
Number 6.
Okay, so I have 1 vote for 6.
7.
Sonia says 7.
7.
Okay, I hear more 7s. Okay.
7.
Okay.
6.
All right, Risa says 6. Okay. All right, so looks like Risa and Frank are the correct ones. Yeah, in this case, pretty. What is pretty describing, guys?
The dress.
The dress, yes. So remember, adjectives describe nouns. They describe things. So in this case, dress is the thing that it's describing. But in number 7, what is pretty describing in number 7?
The answer.
No.
Interesting.
It's describing interesting.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it's not really interesting. It's not very interesting. It's pretty interesting. So in this case, it's not describing the word answer. It's actually describing the adjective interesting. So again, that's what adverbs can do. Adverbs can describe other adjectives. So in this case, yeah, number 7, pretty is an adverb. Okay, now guys, as you can see, some of these words are tricky. Pretty, for example, can be an adverb or an adjective. And then looking at the other examples here on the screen, well, as you can see, it takes time. Adverbs are tricky. So again, thinking about number 3 especially, friendly is an adjective. It's always an adjective. Okay, well guys, our time is up for tonight, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. Now, let's go ahead and talk about our next activity. So again, on Friday, I'm going to post our next activity, which is involving adverbs. Now, it's kind of like the other activities. I'll have some questions, some things for you to do, but I also have included a couple of instructional videos in the activity so that you can kind of go back and review a few things and kind of talking about a few other tricky areas for adverbs. So again, I'm going to post the activity on Friday, and actually I'm going to give you a little bit more time to finish it, simply because 4th of July, you know, a holiday, is coming up on that weekend. So I'm actually going to leave it open until Monday, July 6th. Okay? So, and again, this particular video, I would really recommend everybody, you might want to go back and review what we've done today to help you understand some of the things we've talked about. So, guys, as you know, we're getting close to the end of our session. So next Wednesday is July 1st. So that's going to be our next chat. And then our final chat of the summer and for the 2019-20 year will be Wednesday, July 8th. And